All right, we are live. Dr. Bob Gabbay. This is quite a treat. Thank you for joining me on the Future of Fitness.
Thanks. Excited to be here.
Yeah. So I'm going to give a little bit of background. There's so much to talk about. This is I want to make sure that every minute I have with you is valuable for our audience. I first got introduced to you while you were on stage. Actually, you were doing a panel at the Connected Health and Fitness Summit back in February in Los Angeles of 2025. February of 2025 in Los Angeles. Uh, the panel was moderated with Jeff Sweefel from Lifetime and Miura. You also had John Canarak, I believe, who a longtime private equity guy and investor within the industry. It was the most attended, I think, of all of the panels that I saw there. And it was focused on GLP-1s. And our industry, like most of America and globally now, is somewhat infatuated with the topic of this magic pill that we can take to lose weight. And there's very few people in our industry that do not have a very strong opinion about GLP-1. And as we were joking, like we love strong opinions with little education. That's just how we tend to roll. So don't let the facts get in the way. Anyway, when I saw the opportunity to maybe grab you and get you on a podcast and really start to decipher what's going on within this really fast emerging sector of our industry, it was great. So I'm going to shut up now. Doctor, thank you for joining me. Maybe give a quick introduction to who you are, your background, and then we'll take it from there.
Sure, thank you. Really pleased to have the opportunity to speak with you and your audience because the fitness world is so critically important to the health of people. So I'm an endocrinologist by training, and I've held a number of leadership roles over the years. Most recently, I was Chief Scientific and Medical Officer of the American Diabetes Association, and before that, Chief Medical Officer of Harvard Medical School's Joslin Diabetes Center. And I continue to see patients with diabetes, and of course, many of them live with obesity, and been following this world of GLP-1s for quite some time. So glad to be here and look forward to our conversation.
Awesome. Let's start with this. Can you give us a summary of the history of GLP-1s? Like, where do these things come from? How long have they been around? What has been the typical use cases for them? All of those things.
Yeah, it's a pretty remarkable story that it actually is a medication, a class of medications. It's been around for 20 years. And I'm hard pressed to think of any example of something that's been around for 20 years and then all of a sudden explodes. And that's what happened here, over the last 2 or 3 years, where the number of people on these medications has just skyrocketed. It's become part of popular culture in so many ways. So it actually started way back from the saliva of a Gila monster, this gnarly looking
What?
lizard. And they isolated something in that essentially was the first GLP. And GLP-1 is also a natural hormone that the body makes typically when you eat, and it's secreted by the intestines. So the challenge to use it as a medication is that GLP-1 in the blood lives only a couple of minutes. And so its effect is very short. And so the work that's happened over the last 20 years has been to create longer acting GLP-1s that can then have all of the benefits, and using GLP-1, that natural hormone, at even higher levels that can have all sorts of effects that we'll talk about.
Awesome. Excuse my ignorance on any of this, but GLP-1 is a peptide. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. Yeah. And it's naturally occurring. Again, it's something that the body secretes. It's glucagon like peptide 1, shortened as GLP-1. And because it is a peptide, like most proteins, if you were to just take it as a tablet or just take it orally, it gets destroyed by the stomach. And so by the acid in the stomach. And that's why typically it's an injected treatment. But again, there's lots of work to get beyond that.
So when we talk about the difference between like a pharmaceutical and a peptide, I think that's something that confuses a lot of people, including myself. Like, what are those differences, and then how does regulations affect one versus the other?
Yeah, and that's a good question. So typically, most of the medications that we're familiar with, from aspirin and all of that to you name, the vast majority of medications. They're a single molecule. They can be synthesized in the laboratory, and because of that, you can ensure purity and all of the important things that come with that. Over the last several years, there have been the ability to make proteins or peptides, which are groups of amino acids strung together, either shorter, and that's usually a peptide, or longer, a protein. And those have to generally be formed by bacteria or something like that and synthesized in that way. And because proteins are destroyed in the stomach to break them down for digestion, when you eat a protein, you break it down with the acid of the stomach and you absorb the amino acids. They're generally not available orally. You can't take them as tablets. If you think of a peptide or protein that's been around for a while, uh, insulin is an example of that. And insulin, for many years, had to be isolated from the pancreases of pigs or cows until 1980s into the 90s, where bacteria could be developed to make these proteins, and that's what we use today is human insulin that's produced by bacteria.
Gotcha. So, over the past few years and the recent history here of GLP-1s, what has been the technological breakthrough that it's allowed it to really hit the mass market? Like, what has changed?
They've been able to do, it started as a twice a day injection. Then, in the evolution, again, this is over the last 20 years, it became a once a day injection, and then ultimately a once a week injection. As they kept tweaking with the protein, they were able to make it not only longer acting, but also more potent. And particularly the potency has been around weight loss. So the early GLP-1s probably gave about a 7% weight loss. And now the newer ones are anywhere from 15 to 22% weight loss. So much more effective, and more effective than honestly any treatment we've ever had for obesity, with the exception of surgery. And that's when things really exploded, starting with Ozempic as an example, giving 15% weight loss. We never had anything that was as effective as that. And then the other thing that sort of fueled this excitement is that these medications that were again developed for the treatment of diabetes, not for the treatment of obesity, but discovered to have great effects on obesity, also had lots of other benefits. And first amongst those was that it reduced cardiovascular disease, almost an accidental discovery.
With what we have now in the market, what is the current state of GLP-1s? I mean, like it's mostly injections. When I heard you guys talk a few months ago, I think someone said there's certain statistics that stuck in my head. Over 120 different variations currently in development of GLP-1s. I mean, the market's absolutely exploding. This is going to be a $1 trillion industry without a doubt, right? So where are we at right now? And this is we're recording right now in 2025.
Well, there is a huge pipe of newer treatments, and the newer treatments are, again, this evolution of making even better therapies. The two main ones that are the most effective right now are semaglutide, also marketed as Wegovy or Ozempic, just the hormone GLP-1. And then there's a second medication called tirzepatide, and that's a combination of two hormones, not only the GLP-1, but a second hormone, GIP, gastric inhibitory polypeptide. And that combination of GLP-1 and GIP has even more weight loss effect. It's even more potent. And that's available as, for example, Mounjaro or Zepbound. So those are the two. And the pipeline of new therapies are either making it easier to take, so oral versions that you could take as a tablet. There is a tablet form of semaglutide available now, but it's much, much weaker. It doesn't have the same effect. Rybelsus is the medication. It doesn't have the same sort of potency. So it's either making it easier to take by making it oral, or once a month, or there's a patch that's being developed that you just put the patch on and you absorb it. So that's one class, making it easier to take. The other sort of pipeline efforts are to get around some of the side effects, and we can talk more about that in a moment,
Oh, we will.
particularly about muscle wasting. And then another sort of type of innovation in the GLP-1s is, well, if two hormones are good, the GLP-1 and GIP, what if you do three hormones? Or what if you do a combination of two others or three others? And so they're mixing and matching different hormones that are known to be involved in food intake and seeing if they can get even more potency. Can we get even beyond 22% weight loss, for example, or less side effects? There's really a lot of activity here. And to your point, the market for these has been astronomical. Because of their high cost, it is a highly profitable business to be in. And so, yeah, there's lots of companies that are working on this.
Yeah, it's I'm not the only one who has this kind of, I guess, realization of why it irks us, right? Within the fitness industry, we've always said, healthy lifestyle, exercise, right? Nutrition, all these things. That's how you get to your goals. The fact that this problem is a lot largely attributed to the quality of food that we've been sold, the addictive nature of foods in the Western diet. And, please at any point disagree with me. I would love to hear your opinion on this. So that irks me that the problem was largely attributed to marketing and food. And now the pharmaceutical companies are coming along to solve the problem and they're making a ton of money. So the food companies made a ton of money, making a ton of money when a problem that maybe shouldn't have really existed ever, right? Is this large obesity issue that we have. So, yeah, I mean, that's fundamentally, I think, what a lot of people have a problem with, whether they've articulated it or not. That seems to be the issue that people have. So, I guess the question I'm leading to is like, how does that sit with you, Dr. Bob? I mean, is that true? I mean, you're the one at the forefront of the research.
You know, I, I first of all, I don't think it's either or.
Okay,
Meaning either lifestyle or medication. I think lifestyle is incredibly important and important for people on these medications as well. Doesn't mean that they don't need to be thinking about eating right and exercising. In fact, in some ways, for the eating side of things, it makes it easier for them to adhere to a healthier diet. So it's not either or, would be the first thing I would say. Uh, yes, the availability and the promotion of essentially unhealthy foods has been a big part of where we are today. And at the same time, there's physiology that makes it difficult for people to have long-term sustained weight loss. Certainly some people do, but if you look nationally, that really hasn't been as successful as we'd like it to be. So there are going to be people that get to their goals through lifestyle alone, and there are going to be people that get to their goals with lifestyle plus medication. And so it's not a battle between those two. They're really complementary. You can almost think of in a milder form, there are people that have high blood pressure, and we know that diet and exercise can improve blood pressure. But some people need that plus medication. It doesn't negate that eating a healthy diet is important. It just means they can't get there through that alone.
gotcha. Uh, So the statistics around this and the usage and well, there was a lot. I mean, there was on the panel you had, there was a lot of very interesting statistics. I believe 1 in 8 Americans are currently on some version. Um, the reduction in food spending, I think it was like $4 to $6 per person per week, something along those lines. And now I've heard other varying statistics that are different than that. So they're all over the place. Everyone's quoting stuff. So give us from what you know, Dr. Bob, like what are some of the real statistics on the usage or any other interesting things that would be valuable to our audience?
Yeah, I mean, part of the reason that the statistics are in a lot of different places is this is just happening very quickly. And so, it's hard to stay up to date and measure these things. What we do know, and this was the Kaiser Health Foundation, did a study that said 1 out of 8 people in the adults in the US have tried a GLP-1. So many people have tried it, but here's an interesting thing. More than half of the people who take a GLP-1 stop it within a year. And that is a real issue because that's much more so than most any other therapy. And sort of understanding that cost and access are certainly part of that, but side effects, expectations, I think is an important one. It takes time for these medicines to work because you start at a very low dose and gradually go up to minimize the side effects. And so to really see the kind of weight loss that I described, 15 to 22%, takes months to get there. And there are people that, will take it for a few weeks and go, I didn't really lose any weight. This stuff doesn't work. And they stop it. I think there's an educational component here that can help as well. But it's estimated, this is a wild sort of thing that I saw. The airline industry has started to think about what the implications over the next decade are in terms of people on these medications weighing less. Planes are going to carry, less weight, and it's 100 million liters of jet fuel that they'll be able to save as a result of this. It's having implications in so many different areas. Restaurants are struggling with this to try to people are splitting meals more, but we're just beginning to understand the full implications.
Yeah, that's interesting, right? So there you have it, people. If you want to, save the environment, get on GLP-1s. Side effects. You mentioned. Let's get into it. What are some of the side effects that you guys are seeing with the medications?
Well, the most common is nausea, GI upset, constipation, diarrhea, those types of things. That is reasonably common. You went off camera. If that's, I'll continue anyway.
Yeah, please do.
The nausea issue is very common. The way to get around that or the way to reduce that is to start at a very low dose. And so typically these medicines are started at the lowest dose for a month of weekly injections and then going to the next dose. And the side effects get better over time. And so some people are able to tolerate that, some cannot. So that's the most common side effect. I think the side effect that is particularly important for this audience is muscle wasting. So turns out that almost any kind of weight loss results in loss of fat, but also loss of muscle. And so these medications similarly do the same thing. And this is where interventions can happen to reduce that weight loss, and strength training and protein intake are two biggies.
How what have you seen so far as how the fitness industry has partnered with GLP-1s? Is there any shining examples across the country where you've seen, okay, like this program is doing exceptionally well of taking GLP-1 patients, offering them the support they need through exercise, strength training, nutrition, lifestyle? Like, yeah, what can we emulate?
I think there are examples out there. I think it's evolving quickly because, again, this whole phenomenon, everything we've been talking about, has really only been over the course of 2 or 3 years. And the skyrocketed use has really increased significantly. I think the message that I would give to your audience is, this is a great opportunity to jump into uh, in terms of helping people live healthy on these medications because again probably 1 out of 8 of your clients are using these medications, perhaps even more, to a strength training program and explaining to them why strength training is that much more important on these medications than before, I think is another important message, and ensuring that they get enough protein intake because people eat a lot less on these medications, and that's part of why they lose weight. It's easy for them not to get enough protein. And the general sort of minimal recommendations are zero point 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram body weight per day. And if you're over 65, 1.5 grams per kilogram per day. And people may need even more, but we know that those are at least the minimum. And so doing some kind of nutritional intake and being able to sort that out can be helpful. I think another area that they can play an important role, and I think you see examples of this, are providing the education and information to people on these medications. Because typically, clinicians are busy, primary care providers have less than 10 minutes. They have to cover lots of different areas. They don't get a chance to really talk through all of what we're talking about in terms of these medications and how to use them appropriately, how to manage side effects, and all of that opportunity. Again, trainers are day by day interacting with these individuals, and they can really motivate them, engage them, and educate them. I think there's a huge opportunity there. And I think some are moving into that space, but honestly, I think everybody should.
And this brings up something that you and I are just talking about prior to recording, which is keenly interesting to me and something I've been talking about for a long time is like, can the fitness industry and the healthcare industry work together? Is there a convergence happening at this point? And in order for some, and this is a great kind of focal point for something like that to take place. The setting's perfect. Like the combined effects of both exercise, nutrition, and the pharmaceutical are undeniable when done correctly. So the table seems to be set for this to happen. What in your mind needs to take place? What needs to change for us to fully have a great partnership between the fitness professionals, the gyms and the health clubs and the healthcare industry as it exists now?
First, I would say I think this is an opportunity for that to happen. I think clinicians are thinking more and more about the muscle loss issue and how to deal with that. Uh, from the clinician, the healthcare professional side, I can speak to. Uh, Again, time is very hectic. They can make a suggestion, and this is an educational thing that has to happen for them to say, you should do some strength training. Are you a member of a fitness center? Have you thought about doing that, etc.? I think that's one step. The next step would be to know the right fitness providers to refer to. That involves connecting. The way that happens amongst physicians in general is through social interactions and other, sort of ways. Like that's how we often decide who to refer to. We get to know people and we go, oh yeah. Or a patient comes and said they had a great experience with X, and the provider goes, okay, well, maybe I'll mention that. I think targeting primary care providers with that kind of thing, because they tend to have people local, and so knowing who the fitness providers are locally can be really helpful. So I think patients can be their own advocates and educators of clinicians. I think the fitness professionals can reach out in even sort of simple social ways, believe it or not,
Yeah, we're all
is
people. Yeah.
effective. We're all people, right? Exactly. Uh, you're at the, yeah, exactly. So I think there's opportunities there, and this is a nice place for that conversation to happen, because strength training and muscle loss is on the radar for clinicians in a way that it wasn't as much before.
What about education for the fitness professional? Like, do you see ways in which that needs to evolve as well?
Yeah, I do. I think, this kind of podcast is a great way to get people up to speed, because as you started out by saying, everybody has, strong opinions, but often don't have all the facts. And so understanding more of the facts and getting them from reputable sources, because again, you can see anything and everything out there, I think is really important. And so going to trusted sources for this kind of information. And then as they become more educated, they can share that information with their clients in a really helpful way.
Okay. Dr. Bob, if you were going to open a health club gym, right, and you were going to have the perfect synchronicity between the health club and the trainer and the gym, and I know you're not a gym operator, so we'll take that into credit, but What would you create? How would this look in a perfect world to you? What would that look like?
Wow, that's an interesting thought experiment. Well, it seems like the key here is engagement. From what I understand and some of the statistics I heard at the Connected Fitness conference, people join, but it doesn't always stick, and they don't go regularly. And again, any treatment, and I would consider fitness and exercise as a treatment, is only as effective as whether people are adherent to it. The models that I thought were particularly exciting were where a sense of community is established and or relationship either with a trainer. I think that's part of the magic of trainers is that they develop a relationship and then people want to continue because of that relationship. The examples of fitness centers that create an environment where you want to just sort of hang out and socialize a little bit and talk to other people. And, that also helps things to stick. So I think one big piece is addressing that. And I think digital wraparound tools can help in that. I think the more, creating this sense of we are the experts and we know about fitness and nutrition, and to the degree that one can, certification programs or other, sort of validated ways to be able to say, no, it's not just me saying that. We have a program, everybody's trained in a certain way, I think can really help to develop the trust that you need. So I think community and trust are two big pieces of this to ensure engagement.
Yeah, it's really interesting that there's been some emergence of specific educational programs for fitness professionals around GLP-1s. I know Eric Durock created one. There's
Yes.
been a couple other ones as well. So I think that's something that people should really start to pay attention to because this is emerging. It's not going anywhere. You said something about a digital wraparound tools to help the engagement of the consumer and the patient. What does that look like in your mind?
Well, there are a number of things out there, and I think this is also evolving in exciting ways. The simplest are sort of reminders, which are somewhat effective. The more that it can be personalized and contextualized, the better. And the more effective. Again, it's again once again about engagement. Most of these digital tools, if they're not super engaging, people use them and then stop and they ignore all the reminders. But we know a fair amount about that sort of field, and the giants like Facebook and et cetera, have figured out how to sort of get you coming back. So using that type of knowledge, personalizing it, and again, AI can be really effective here to give you the right nudges at the right time to eat healthy, to ensure that you're getting enough protein intake if you're on these medications, to, we missed you, a personal note or something that feels personal, even if it's AI generated. I think all those things can be effective.
Are there any specific tools out there that exist now that you would refer people to, or anything you've seen that's
There are a number of them. I think from the large companies that are doing this, like Noom and others, to smaller startups that are using lots of contextual data. There's an Israeli company, Switch, that has created a great tool. There's Lark that it is all AI driven coaching and fun and friendly way. I think there's a lot of these out there, and you know where fitness centers can partner with them. They can certainly develop their own, uh, and or they could partner with something that's already out there. What we do know about behavior change in general is that tracking and feedback are effective tools. And so people that are, I've been wearing an Aura ring for ages. I just like to get that. I'm just like that kind of data kind of guy where you can get people to track things and review. That is a powerful tool to keep engagement going.
as far as like diagnostics for these patients? Like you mentioned, Aura Ring. I have mine. I love it. I love Garmin too. I love all of them.
Yeah, there's a bunch of good ones out there. Yeah.
But what about like regular diet? Like, are these patients getting blood work or should they be getting blood work on a regular basis? Are we doing any stuff with like, any kind of genomics? Are we doing any kind of, yeah, what other technologies are being
Yeah,
integrated?
so there's standard of care kind of stuff, which is, sort of general monitoring of lab tests. And then there's sort of the frontier things that, sort of the bleeding edge of what else could be looked at. And I think we're in the early days of understanding that, but I am sure that in the near future, we will understand more and more. I went to a great conference, and you can see information about this on the web, called Next Med Health, and it's sort of the future of healthcare. And this year, it was really dominated, as you might imagine, by AI. And so one of the exciting things that are in the near term is creating a digital twin of yourself that would have all of your data and then be able to simulate different things to see what the impact would be on your health. And again, the more data it has to use to determine that, the more it's going to be able to personalize it for you. Like, what's the biggest bang for the buck for you?
We're living in crazy
Pretty
times.
wild stuff.
We're living in
And
crazy
and
times.
it's near term. I mean, this is not 10 years from now. This is, a couple of years.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, even less. Yeah. The pace of that world is just moving so quickly.
And I want to get back to your vision of where the future is, but it's so fascinating to me. Right now I'm reading this book about Kit Carson and the Mountain Men of the West, and back in like the 1830s and 1850s, and I sit there and I'm reading and I'm like, they would find our world now completely unrecognizable. Right. None of it would make sense. And with the rate of technological evolution that we're seeing right now, I think in 20 years, we're going to say like, we were in the Stone Ages back in 2024, right? It's ridiculous at
Completely.
how
Yeah.
fast it's going.
Less time than that. I think in
Yeah.
less time than that, because it's
Gosh.
accelerating. Yeah. I completely believe that to be true. Yes.
Yeah. Well, we're going to touch on that before we close out here. But the one of the things I want to get on, because you mentioned in notes as we were preparing for this, is exercise mimetics, which I'd never heard of before. So educate me. What do you mean by that?
Well, this is also part of that pipeline of medications. So the concern that there's muscle loss associated with these medications and weight loss in general, can you stimulate muscle growth in the way that strength training does? And as they're understanding more and more of what controls muscle growth, there are some agents that are being tested to see if they can, in essence, mimic the effects of exercise. I personally don't think that it's going to do everything that exercise does, but it could increase muscle mass, and that would be one step. That said, one thing I often will say to patients and others is, if you look at all of the benefits of exercise, if this was a pill, and I'm not suggesting it should be a pill, but to how effective it is on so many different parts of the body and the brain and everything. I mean, there's nothing like it. And so, firm believer that exercise will always be important, but could there be medications that help individuals on the GLP-1s to sort of build some muscle mass?
The Some of the things I've been hearing and reading about too is it's not just about weight loss with GLP-1s and similarly, it's talking about effects on addiction, right? And things like that. So, what other opportunities do you see for this particular classification of drugs in other areas?
Well, I think that really is what's made this such an exciting area. So the things we already have proof of is that they lower the risk of heart disease, that they help with sleep apnea. And these are based on randomized controlled trials where half the people get the medicine, half the people don't. They don't know, and the investigators don't know. So they're really like the gold standard to see what works. So heart disease, kidney disease, liver disease, sleep apnea, osteoarthritis, all of those have evidence from these large trials to show that they're beneficial. And then there's a slew of new possibilities that are being investigated. And one is around substance abuse and addiction disorders. And there is some evidence to suggest that it's beneficial there. Other exciting area is around dementia and Alzheimer's, where there's some evidence to suggest it may be beneficial there as well. And psoriasis, of all things, seems to be beneficial there. So the list keeps growing. There was just a study released that showed benefit for people with peripheral arterial disease that get pain on walking and are limited by how far they can walk. A year of treatment with these medications improved that significantly. So stay tuned. These medicines seem to do a variety of things beyond what they were developed for originally was really just to lower blood glucose for people with diabetes. And now we've gotten to, all of these other benefits.
Wow. The big thing I think that the industry wants to know, excuse me, is this actually driving people to work out more, right? And I've been very opinionated, and as one of my friends Brandon Cullen said, he says, unfortunately, one of the side effects is not exercise, right? People have to do that on their own, and I know it's very anecdotal now that we're seeing some people go in, but my base thought and what I've seen on human behavior in my time in the trenches as a coach and a gym owner is like it's very difficult for people. And if there's an easy pill for people to take to lose weight and they don't have to do the hard stuff, they're probably going to lean towards the pill alone, right? But a percentage of them will definitely do both, right? Well, they'll do the lifestyle, they'll do the exercise, they'll do the nutrition alongside. So, I mean, are we seeing any early indications now that this is actually driving people to work with trainers and health clubs?
The data is mixed so far. I do think there are people that, are, and I see these individuals as patients that have been so demoralized by their weight. And the shame and stigma associated with it, they just can't even imagine going to a fitness club. And now with treatment and losing some weight and having some success, they're more empowered to want to go do something to be healthy. People unfortunately can get into this sort of rut of it's just not even worth doing anything because nothing works. And I think you've got a lot of people with obesity that have fallen into that sort of rut and continue to eat unhealthy and not exercise. For many people, this has helped them to move in the right direction. And so, yes, there'll be some people that say, well, I don't need to exercise, which of course is wrong. And the side effect of strength training, the importance of strength training is something they need to understand. But there'll be others where this jumpstarts them to want to take care of themselves a bit more because they see some success.
So here's a fun question I have for you. So we're in 2025. Let's paint the picture for the turn of the decade, 2030. Where do you think it'll be? Where do you think our country, our communities will be when it comes to our health, how healthcare has changed? But paint the big picture, the science fiction picture, right? Where do you think we're going to be?
Wow. Yeah, I think there are a lot of things that will change and disrupt things. I think that there'll be a number of new GLP-1 like medications available. The hope is that as there are more on the market, the cost will go down, access will increase, coverage will be better, and more individuals will have the benefits of these medications and the newer versions that'll be available by then. That is likely to lead to some bending of the curve of obesity, and doing that has so many other different implications for health because obesity is sort of the central problem leading to so many other things. I'm hopeful that that happens, that society becomes more comfortable with the idea of treating obesity as a disease in the same way we treat hypertension and high cholesterol. And there's no shame in saying I'm on a statin for my cholesterol. That is just a normal, like, sure, yeah. Is it everybody at a certain age? Uh, I hope that there'll be a better understanding around sort of the roles of exercise, weight training. I think there'll be AI tools that will make it easier to have all the information at the right time, both for the individual themselves and for the clinician that's seeing them. And, one thing I'm excited just as a clinician is I spend much long of my visit with my patients staring into a computer screen instead of looking at them because I have to make sure I check all these boxes and do all that stuff. Well, AI, can and already is to some degree solving that problem. And so the relationship between healthcare provider and patient becomes stronger, because that I do think is the magic that medicine has always had. And I hope that this will enable that human connection to be even stronger. And I hope that, and we were talking about this a little earlier, uh, if you think about, I thought of the analogy of like chiropractors. 20 years ago, they were sort of on the fringe a bit, and particularly from the healthcare professional sort of side, they were not really part of the club, so to speak. And they gradually became part of the club, reimbursed by insurance, and now it's a standard form of treatment. Well, I'd love to see the same thing happen for fitness professionals, that they become an important part of the ecosystem, not only recognized by healthcare professionals, covered by payers. And I hope that we can get there, because there's no medicine better than exercise out there right now. And so we just have to find the ways to make that happen for more people.
Yeah. Well, that's a whole nother conversation for a whole nother podcast and how that would happen, Dr. Bob Gay. That's something I would love to see. I think there's a lot of people within our industry that are advocating for that, but also there's a lot of people who have just kind of lost faith that it's ever going to happen. So we'll see. I mean, who knows? Tomorrow brings a new day, and things right now are pretty exciting. And really appreciate you spending your time with me. This has been super informative, and I hope a lot of people listen to this once, but maybe twice, and get a firmer understanding of what the opportunities are here, what the real realities of the drug and its applications, and go from there. Doctor, if people want to get a hold of you, or if you'd like people to find out more about what you do, is there any place you'd like them to go on?
Yeah, probably the best is LinkedIn. I post a lot of new things around GLP-1s and lots of other things. That probably is the easiest place to do that. And I really want to thank you for the opportunity to join you, and also for your forward thinking to cover this topic in depth for your audience. And so thank you.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Bob Gabbay.